What's up, everybody, and welcome to my first deck breakdown, this time for the week of December 23rd, 2024. This is going to be a new series that I'm going to start where I want to take a look at the weekend's results for a specific format. Right now, we are in the standard RCQ season, so we are going to be covering a lot of standard over the next few weeks. I'm going to try to release these videos every Monday. That way you can kind of take a look at the week ahead and figure out what deck you might want to play in your local tournaments or even national tournaments or even cash tournaments, whatever tournaments you want to play. But I want to give you the tools to be able to look up these winning decks, where the meta is, what may or may not be shifting. And this first video is going to be a little bit more in depth, where we're going to kind of take a look at a couple different resources. We're going to take a look at the meta in general. And then in subsequent videos, we're going to see if there's any changes in the meta. But the important thing that we're going to walk away with is how to look up deck lists and see exactly what decks you may or may not want to play. And then if we have time, we might even in the future do some deck breakdowns, meaning we're going to like play through those decks and really understand them. But today we're actually going to break down the decks. We're going to take a look, what are those decks, what are the most winning decks, and then see how they're winning and why they're number one. So let's go ahead and take a look at my browser source here. So this is one of my favorite websites to go to look up different decks. And this is mtgdecks.net. The other one that you may have heard is MTG Goldfish. This is also a great resource. This can show you sort of the top decks at a glance. You also can get some tournament results. You can go find those tournament results. But I just like the way my brain works. This is all laid out specifically for me. I love this. So we'll probably do most of the work right here on mtgdecks.net. And what we want to take a look at first and foremost is standard. So if you come to just the base website, you can go here, tabletop decks and meta. You can also see arena decks and meta, singleton formats, so on and so forth. But we want to go with tabletop because that's what we're playing. That's what we're most concerned about. You can also find a bunch of arena decks here as well. Because again, the focus of this is what deck you're going to bring to your local tournament. So we want to see what the results are for those types of tournaments. And so the first thing that we're going to see is the actual breakdown of the meta. So the meta right now is what most people think it is. Dimir Midrange is going to be the number one. It's the strongest deck in the format, a lot of people believe. Golgari Demons is second. Gruul Aggro is third. And then Red Deck wins, but you also see it's kind of Boros. Is the other one. So these four decks are considered their tier 1 decks. And then we have a whole slew of tier 2 decks. And so this is where things get really interesting. You find Boros Burn, Mono White Tokens, Domain Zer Overlords. So you're going to see a lot of these types of decks in here. So one of the things that I really like to do is take a look at win rates. So before we break down the decks, let's actually take a look at the win rates. So if you come here, this table is quite an eye chart. And this is between, you want to take a look at the dates. So this is between middle of the year, 2024, to the current date, which is today. This is after midnight. I meant to get this done on the 23rd. So, don't get too mad at me. It's technically the 24th. But you can come here and look at the win rates for these decks. And you'll see why the tier 1 decks are the tier 1 decks, right? So you see Red Deck wins. It has an overall win rate of 57%. You see the Golgari at 55, the Dimir Demons at 57. But we start to see some really interesting things when we take at these numbers, because we can also look at the cross-reference. So if I wanted to know how the Red Deck wins is doing against Dimir Midrange, you can see that it has about a 53% win rate over 43 matches that have been logged in here. You can see Golgari Demons is 60%, Boros Burn is 56%, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of get an understanding of whatever deck that you're really interested in playing, how it compares to the field. So I'm a big numbers guy. I love numbers. This is something that you should definitely take a look at, see how it updates, and see if it changes your opinion. So one that really always jumps out at me, for instance, is Boros Mice, right? There's not a lot of data. Let's be realistic here. There's 46 matches, but it's doing pretty well in those 46 matches that have been played. So all of that to be said, we can also change some of the dates. So this is 180 days. We can say maybe the last 15 days. Has anything changed crazy in the last 15 days? Well, we see Jeskai Convoke is really high. We see Mono Black Bloodletter is high. But again, there's not a lot of data here. So you got to always take it with a pinch of salt. You got to really peel into the data here to understand what's good and what's not. But where we want to spend most of our time is in the standard tournament results. So if we look here at standard tournaments, this is where we're going to start seeing results across the board. One thing I'd like to do is you can just take a general look. So we want to take a look at the weekend pass. So that's going to be the 22nd, 21st, and the 20th. And that's mostly just this first page. And so you're going to find a few different things here. You're going to find paper tournaments. You see here community tourneur, 424 tournament scene. But the other thing I like to take a look at is the number of players. So this was an arena tournament. You can see this was a MTG tournament. So this is a in person. This was a Magic Online tournament. So you can take a look at what these little symbols mean on the right hand side. So this is what I like to do when I'm evaluating what deck I really want to play in a tournament. If you have multiple decks, or maybe you're trying to buy into a deck and you're trying to figure out, there's some things that you want to pay attention to. First and foremost, there are Magic the Gathering online leagues and there are challenges. Now, the challenges are really good because they actually declare a first through whatever position. So there's a winner. There's an absolute winner. Also, MTGO tends to have a better player base, stronger player base. So you can really kind of take these results and get a better national feel for what the meta is and what's going on. And we see here that Dimir Midrange took this tournament, with a second being Boros Burn, third being Gruul Aggro, and fourth place being Dimir Midrange. So we can see Dimir Midrange very strong in the top four. Versus a league, it's just going to list everybody that got a 5-0. So Jank decks can get in there, piles can get in there. It's not worth your time to look at the leagues unless you're looking for some sort of fun deck to see what people are getting 5-0s with. So other ones to take a look at, I like taking a look at big markets. Things like San Antonio, Texas. That's going to be a big market, or you can get a Dallas or an Austin or something like that. If you can get, on the East Coast, if you see something in New York, or on the West Coast, like a San Diego, if you can see a big tournament, that's usually worth kind of taking a look. There's stronger players in those markets. Other ones I really like to look at are overseas. Japan has a super strong, I always feel like they're a little ahead of the game as far as what's going on. So you might not have as many players. You see 24 players showed up to this tournament, but you have the Champions Cup store qualifier in Shibuya. So I always will definitely take a look at that. So this was a Prowess aggro deck that won this particular tournament. So this is a great resource for you to take a look at the weekends past and kind of what tournaments went on and what decks performed well. Another thing I do like to take a look at, so if we go back to the standard meta tab, and say you kind of know the deck that you really want to play. Hey, I'm more partial to an aggro deck. Or I'm more partial, Gruul Aggro and Red Deck Wins are basically both aggro decks. Or maybe I'm more partial to the Dimir Midrange. Let's just select Dimir Midrange because it is the first up there. I can select into it, and then again, I'm going to get the breakdown of the results over the last however long. But I can actually filter these on this particular page, which I like. So you can see up here, you can go to MTGO, Arena, or Tabletop. MTGO is worth clicking on, so you can click on that one. And again, I would ignore the leagues, but go to the challenge, right? We saw this challenge. This was the deck that won. It was a Dimir Midrange there. We also see that it took fourth in that same tournament. But if we scroll through here, we can see the results on the left-hand side. You see that there was no other first-place finishes for Dimir Midrange in MTGO. The other thing you can do is take a look at Tabletop and see, again, what place this deck got and at what tournament. So some of these, some of the markets across the U.S. and nationally might not have the strongest of players, so it might not be worth your time. If you're not sure, the next thing you can look at is going to be the size of the tournament. So you see this is 63 players here, and this was a Dimir Kaito deck, so it might be worth taking a look. There was a lot of players at the tournament. That kind of washes whether or not it's a weak or strong territory. Generally, if there's a lot of folks, you're like, okay, there's bound to be some good players there, so it's worth still kind of taking a look at what this person is doing with this deck. So with all that to be said, if I want to look here, I'm looking at Dimir mid-range. I want to understand what goes into the winning Dimir mid-range decks. This is where you kind of start to collect data as fast as you can. I like to go in here and say, okay, I'm looking on all the first place. We have tabletop selected, and I'm just going to take a brief view. So I'm going to click in and say, okay, what is the package for Dimir midrange? What we're going to find out pretty quickly is like it's Fairy Mastermind, Spyglass Siren. You're going to have Enduring Curiosity, Floodpitch Drowner, and Kaito are going to be pretty common repeating cards in this deck. So you can always just kind of take a look and say, all right, what's the tech? What is some really interesting things that they might be doing? Okay, this guy's running Urtai Resurrected. So they're running one Urtai. They're running some Saibas. This is an interesting tech in Dimir right now. It's going to work off of Kaito because it's also a ninja, so it gets the same bonuses. It has flash, it's hexproof, it's doing some really cool stuff. What other things are in? Okay, we've got 2 copies of Tishana's in the main, and Tishana does a lot of work being able to flash in, turning off things. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered by Tishana's, it's permanent until Tishana is dead. And then you have now things like Saiba to protect Tishana to keep something off, like turn the ability off on it. So this is kind of what you do. So you take a look, and then I go into the next one, do the same thing. Okay, I took another first place deck. We got the Fairy Masterminds like we thought, Enduring Curiosity, Floodpitch Drowner. We got the Spyglass Siren. We got the Kaitos. Okay, what are some interesting tech? Oh, this person went 3 Kaitos so that they could add in something like a Faebloom Trick, which is going to work with Spell Stutter. More fairies on the battlefield, meaning you're getting more value out of that Spell Stutter, right? So you can go ahead and click through each one of these and really kind of figure out what is generally in this deck. This is where I think MTG Goldfish does a really good job. So if I just like, okay, hey, Brian, that's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of cards to read through. I just want a general, like, what is a good, like, what are most people playing in a Dimir mid-range? Okay, I recommend you go to the MTG Goldfish. You can go to decks here, popular decks, and then go into standard. And then if I click on Dimir mid-range, this is going to give you a common, well, down here is going to give you a common breakdown of what you're going to find. Up here, it's usually sort of like the most recent tournament person. This is that same tournament that we saw, the standard challenge, first place, 9-1. This person is running the Mockingbird version. It's really interesting. It's got Gix in the main, which is interesting, an Urtai in the main, a Sheoldred in the main, but then of course we have the Kaito. And then we still have the Enduring Curiosity, the Fairy Mastermind, the Floodpitch Drowner, the Spyglass Siren, like all of those things that we come to expect. But if you want a general overview, you can come down here and start seeing percentages of decks and what cards they hold. So we have the Fairy Mastermind. 100% of decks are rocking 4 of these. 99% of decks are running 3.5. So almost every deck is running 4. Same thing here. 98% of decks are running 3.9. So 98% of decks are running 4 of these. 96 are running basically 4 of these. 73% of decks, this is where things start to break down a little bit, are running 2 of these. 51% of decks are running 2 or 3 Preachers. 1 or 2 Sheoldreds. Mockingbirds are going up there. 40% of decks are starting to run 2 of these. So if you want just a general deck to start with, this is a good place to just see, all right, generally what are people running? And then, like I said, almost 100% of people are running 4 of these. And then here's your removal package and counterspell package. Here's your land package. And then here's your sideboard package. So this is a really good resource to get generally what is in each of these decks. So hopefully that is a good primer. Like I said, we're going to spend a little bit of time up front on this particular video priming you as to how to find this stuff, okay? So mtgdecks.net, you have your standard meta. You can take a look at what all these decks are. You can click into these, see the tournament results for these specific decks. And then another direction to kind of get the same information is to go through and start with the standard tournaments and then figure out, just start clicking into the tournaments and seeing how decks are performing. So again, if I go back to the standard challenge that we were talking about, we see Dimir mid-range and we see him ordered there as well. Okay, cool. We have level set on how to find this stuff. And so now what I like to do is take a look at each of these decks and for the past weekend and just really kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to take this view here. I think this is laid out well. We're going to skip over leagues. Like I said, leagues don't matter. But I want to kind of go through and see over the last, there's probably 13 entries or so right here, how the decks are laying out, how they're panning out. So let's take the first one here. This is kind of quickly, like we're digesting information. We want to get at a glance, like how is the meta unfolding? Is anything changing? Are decks squeaking in there that we didn't expect to squeak in there? So again, we'll take a look at like the top 4 is usually what I like to see. And one of the ones that are jumping out at me right away is 5-color zombies. Like Azorius Convoke is something that's relatively popular right now. It's all about generating as many cards on the board as possible, making a Regal Bunnycorn super big, and then Mockingbird something flying over the top. So like it scales. It's an aggro deck. It's a Convoke deck. So that one didn't surprise me, but the 5-color zombies, that one's surprising. So I want to take a look at that. So this one's running a Hollow Marauder, a Huskborn Swarm, a Gnawing Vermin, Overlord of the Baelmerk, Stalactic Stalker, Blanchwood Prowler, Urgbog Lurgoyf, a Rubblemint Maverick, and Feed the Cycle. So I'm actually seeing this for the first time. This zombie one's jumping out at me. So some of these cards I've never even seen before, like the Hollow Marauder here. Costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. It's a flying 4/2. When it enters the battlefield, any number of target opponents each discard a card. For each of those opponents who didn't discard a card with a mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. Okay, so you're getting card draw engine. It can be super cheap. You could potentially get it for 1 black onto the battlefield, and it's a 4/2. And then we have this Huskburster Swarm, which is, again, 1 less for each creature card you own in exile and in your graveyard. And it's a Menace and Death Touch. Gnawing Vermin enters. Target player mills 2 cards. And then Vermin dies. Target creature you don't control gets -1 until end of turn. Baelmerk, whenever Baelmerk enters or attacks, mill 4 cards. And then you may return a non-avatar creature card. So it sounds like this whole deck strategy is about milling yourself, getting cards into the graveyard, making things super cheap like the Hollow Marauder, the Huskburster, and then getting this Overlord to get you cards. Stalactite Stalker. It's a Menace 1/1 for 1. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a 1/1 counter on Stalactite Stalker. You descend if a permanent card was put into your graveyard. So again, we're milling. So that makes perfect sense. Sacrifice this. Target creature gets -X, where X is the Stalactite's power. So good removal opportunity there. Mill 3 cards, get some counters, mill more cards. So yeah, you're just jamming stuff into the graveyard to make big creatures and cheap creatures get out onto the battlefield. Feed the Cycle, some removal. Overwhelming Remorse is some removal. Season of Loss is more removal. Do we have ways to pull things out of the graveyard? I don't know if I see a way to pull things out of the graveyard. Glistening Deluge on the sideboard. Haywire sideboard. Cut down sideboard. So yeah, we have more card draw engine. We also have some exile things out of the graveyard. So if they have some sort of graveyard recursion, Ghost Vacuum can help with that. So all that to be said, this is all about pitching things into the graveyard and then try to make stuff super cheap or super big. And that's a fun little deck. That's one that just jumped out at us, right? There's 5-color zombies. So that was all just in the first tournament. And then we'll take a look at the next one here. We're not seeing anything crazy except for mono red werewolves again. What are we doing here? Like I said, this is why we do this. We take a look. What is mono red werewolves? This is from Chupacabra Games. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at mono red werewolves. We got Emberheart, Heartfire. So where's the werewolves? It's just mice. It's just mice. Where's the werewolves? Because it has Witchstalker Frenzy in it. Case of the Prison. I mean, there's card draw. Yeah, okay. It's just mono red. It's just mono red aggro. All right, that's funny. So nothing crazy there. We looked at this challenge, looking at the top 4, mid-range, Boros Burn, Growl aggro, Dimir mid-range. Sort of expected results, right? These are all the top decks. The Boros Burn being up there is a little interesting, but it looks like the Boros Burn is more just Boros Mice. It's just Boros Mice. So Boros Mice is becoming popular. Boros Mice is a really strong way to play the Boros aggro deck. Or some were going to like the Boros Prowess version, but the Boros Mice version is really kind of interesting because you have this Flowerfoot Swordmaster, Offspring 2, and it has a Valiant trigger. When this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, mice you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. And because it's an Offspring 2, the Offspring also triggers this. So the Offspring also gets the +1/+0 first time each turn. So you could target the Flowerfoot primary card and then its Offspring, and then giving everything +2/+0 until the end of turn. So cool little tech right there. And then you also have Mabel. When that comes in, it produces the Cragflame Sword, and then it has an equip 2 cost. So you can just sit there and keep equipping things with the sword and triggering Valiant triggers. So this is why the Boros Mice version is really powerful for Boros. And then it throws in things like Shard Mage's Rescue. Again, it's a target ability, so it triggers Valiant. It gives things something hexproof, so you can protect a mouse, and it gets a +1/+1 counter as long as it's enchanted. And then, of course, you got to throw the Shelter by Ghosts in there. So this is just Boros Mice, which is really strong. But they're calling it Boros Burn, which wouldn't be what you would normally think, because Burn goes direct to health. Okay, so that was the challenge. We're going to skip over the league. We looked at this one a little bit. We have a Dimir, Kaito, Golgari. We got a Sultai Tempo. So this is an outlier, all right? We want to take a look at these outliers and see what's going on with this. Okay, it's not too much of an outlier. I've seen some of this deck. So Eddie Merc Crab, a Tolarian Terror. So then you're pitching a bunch of instants and sorceries into the graveyard, making Tolarian really cheap, making Eddie Merc really cheap. When Eddie Merc comes in, enters tapped if it's not your turn. When Eddie Merc enters, tap up to 2 target creatures. So all that means is you can flash it in, you can tap 2 cards, and so that they can't attack that turn. And then when it's back to your turn, it's back on the board. And you can basically play this thing for 2 blue. It's super nice. Same thing with Tolarian. And then you have all of your instants and sorceries that you're just pitching. You got some removal with Bushwhack, bouncing cards, unsummon. This town ain't big enough. Yeah, you're just like bouncing things off of the board and then trying to swing in with your crabs. Your crab and your Tolarian is really kind of the trick, as well as with Storm Chaser's Talent. You're making a bunch of so this deck actually gets really annoying. You're making a bunch of otters, because when you do something like This Town Ain't Big Enough, you can pitch something of yours and pitch something of theirs, and then play the Storm Chaser's Talent again, get more otters, and just keep doing that and getting more otters. And then since you have so many instants and sorceries, you're just like buffing a whole board full of 1/1 otters that have prowess, and then now are all swinging for like 3, 4, 5. So this isn't an outlier per se. I have seen quite a bit of this deck, but it's not in like the top meta. right? So to see that it got third at a tournament is really interesting. Like, hey, is it strong? Is it something I need to be more aware of when I attend a tournament? Because really, again, what we're doing is we're taking a look at like, what do I need to be aware of when I show up to a tournament? What am I building for? And that's a good starting place. A reminder, starting place. We're going big cam here. Starting place. Because what you're really building your deck for is for your local meta. So once you've attended a few tournaments, you're going to start to realize what other folks are playing in your local region, and then you're going to build your deck for that. But you need to start somewhere, and this is where you can start. It's like, what are most people playing? And so that's what we're kind of gathering here. Okay, so we've looked at this one. Let's take a look at San Antonio. Gruul Aggro took it. We got Golgari Annex. So this is Golgari Demons is what this is. Yeah, Golgari Demons, Anoint with Affliction. Where's the Annex? Oh, 4 Unholy Annex. Yeah. Do they have another demon? Normally you see another demon. I guess it's Golgari with Annex. So it's not really Golgari Demon. We're not seeing any other real like demons in there. Okay, so this is basically Golgari with Annex. So Golgari Annex, I like the title. But we see Gruul Aggro, Golgari Annex, Gruul Aggro, Mono Red. Like, it's what we expect to see. Not in the top 4, but I wonder what Insidious Roots is. This is something. Honest Rutstein. Okay. We got the Llanowar. So it's a Golgari. Whoa, actually, we got red in here too. This seems... Where are they getting the red? Blooming Marsh, Fabled Passage, Forest, Restless Cottage, Swamp, Underground Mortuary. What? I don't understand why this was in their hand. Okay. Weird. All right, so we'll keep going on. So nothing crazy there in Texas. We have the Duskborn Showdown. Not enough data. I wouldn't even look at that. We do have the Japan, and so I always like to take a look at the top decks in Japan, see if they're doing any crazy tech. Because like I said, I always feel like they're a little bit like ahead of the curve and trying interesting things. But in this particular case, this seems like a fairly standard Dimir package. Nothing crazy found here. Sideboard, same thing. This is a pretty standard package. Nothing crazy. Again, we're evaluating for areas that might need improvement in our own deck. Are they doing anything crazy that is new tech that we might want to add to our deck? And overall, just kind of getting an understand of what's being played this past weekend. Hopefully giving you ideas about what you are going to play this coming weekend. All right, same thing here. Red aggro deck, nothing crazy. The Gruul, this is a Gruul deck. But yeah, nothing crazy in the sideboard as well. So finally, I'll take another look at Dimir mid-range. Again, nothing crazy here as well. So Japan is being pretty tame right now. So we have a couple standard challenges. Again, these ones are worth looking at. MTGO. So we got Golgari Demons. We have a Boros Burn, Dimir midrange. I usually like to take a look at the top deck just to see if they're doing anything crazy. Like I said, normally you're going to see a demon in the main deck if they're running Annex, right? So an Archfiend of the Dross is a really common demon. Just another opportunity to keep a demon out there, keeping Annex doing damage to them and not damage to you. This one is interesting, though. Thrun, Breaker of Silence we're seeing. So we're seeing a little bit of new tech. It's a trample, 5/5. Can't be the target of non-green spells your opponent's controls or abilities from non-green sources your opponent's control. As long as it's your turn, Thrun has Indestructible. Interesting. There's not a lot of green removal. So that thing's kind of spicy. All right. Some interesting tech. That's the kind of things that we're on the lookout for. So now I got to keep this in mind. Like, if this tech takes off, I might need to, like, what is some non-green removal that I might need to keep in mind. So all that to be said, the rest of the package is pretty standard. But this is kind of what we're doing, right? Like, how is the meta changing? Is anything I need to be on the lookout for when I go to my next tournament and somebody's playing Golgari? Do I need to be aware that they might have a Thrun in there? So that's all something that I kind of want to consider. And then we'll take a look at the Boros Burn deck. Probably nothing crazy here. They're running Witch Stalkers in the main, which is interesting. Normally, I don't quite see Witch Stalker Frenzy in the main, but that 5 damage is huge. Being able to do 5 damage to something that gets Shieldrids, which is generally the most dangerous target. Somebody buffs something up. It gets the 4/5 white Beza, I think is what it is. Gives you the tokens, gives you life, draw a card. That's a 4/5, so being able to take that out. So 5 is a good threshold, so that's interesting that they have that in the main. Normally, you just see that in the side. Then we have the Boros Mice deck here that took 3rd at this tournament. See if there's anything crazy in this deck. Doesn't look like it. Fairly standard. Knight of Grace and the sideboard is interesting. Hexproof from black. And Knight of Grace gets +1/+0 as long as any player controls a black permanent. So that's some interesting tech. They must be really worried about Golgari and Dimir, right? The top decks. So having something that just has straight up protection from black, solid little choice there. And then we'll take a look at the 4th place here just to see, but I don't think there's going to be anything different. Yeah, pretty standard list over there. So that was that challenge. Then we have the other challenge that took place this past weekend. Lots of Dimir here and then Domain. So let's take a look at the Dimir. This is a super standard Dimir package. Just 4/4/4/4 and then a couple Tishanas. Lots of removal, counter spells, 4 Kaitos. Over in the side, neutralize the guards. This is a little bit different than what we normally see. So creature target opponent controls get -1/-1 until end of turn, surveil 2. So it's a nice little board wipe for 1/1. So you'd put this in against like token decks, maybe a red aggro deck. Well, things are still 1/1s. Well, really, the only thing is like a Heartfire Hero. So the mostly probably like token decks is what you're putting that in for. That's why there's really only like one of. Then we take a look at the 2nd place Dimir deck, where you see Aclazotz in there. Aclazotz we'll see from time to time. It's not super crazy tech or new tech in any way. But the fact that it's in the main is kind of interesting. They also have the end in the main. So the end allows you to exile target creature or planeswalker, search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of the card with the same name as that permanent, and then exile them. So this is really good for just like dismantling a strategy that's built off a singular card. But it's interesting that's in the main. Same thing with Gix's Command being in the main. This person's really kind of going like wide in their removal. Urtai, one in the main, is not unheard of by any means. So all that to be said, the interesting tech here is the end, Aclazotz, and Gix's Command. Also, okay, just in general, what's interesting about this Dimir deck is that it's not running the Kaito package. It's not running the Enduring package. It's not running the Siren package. So this is a very different approach to Dimir, and I think this is oh, we're going in. This is the thing that makes Dimir so dangerous in general, is that because there's so many ways to build Dimir, and we're seeing this way right here that it is not it's not the standard package that we've been looking at, but these are all still really powerful cards and powerful strategies to go. And so if I sit down and I see somebody drop a Gloomlake Verge or a Darkslick Shores, I'm like, okay, cool, Dimir. I got to be worried about Enduring and Kaito and the Spyglass Siren. And then they never play it. And then they're hitting me with all this stuff. I'm getting blindsided, right? This is why Dimir is so strong, because there's so many strong cards in blue and black right now. So this is the thing that you got to be worried about, right? This is a strong like Shieldred package. It's kind of controlling things through death and counter spells and board wipes, and then just the generation, the card generation through like Unholy Annex is where they're really kind of getting that value. So this is the thing we gotta be on the lookout for. Another one, Domain Zur Overlords. This is actually pretty common deck on Arena. I've seen it a little bit in paper, but yeah, this deck is a lot. It's running the Overlord package of Flood Pits, Hauntwoods, and Mistmoors. And it's got one Atraxa in there because you have access to all those lands. But then, of course, Zur. And then really, really great removals. Get Lost, Herd Migration, for removals, it's Get Lost, Day of Judgment, Sunfall, Leyline of the Binding. And then that thing is always coming out for 1 white, and it's freaking cheap, and it just blows your board up. Like, I hate this thing. This deck is like one of my least favorite to play against. I love playing this deck. I have it in Arena, but playing against it is just completely oppressive. It's just so oppressive. They get down an early Beanstalk. They're getting card draw. They're over there impending their frickin' Overlords, getting more card draw from up the Beanstalk, taking things out with Leyline Binding for 1 white. Like, it's just so oppressive. And then if they get a Herd Migration down, it's rough. Anyways, nothing crazy there. But it is the first one that we've seen in the top 3 here. So we've done the challenges. Take a quick look at the Philippines. We have a Simic control deck. We've seen this. This is the Tolarian. But the fact that it got first, kind of interesting. Mono white control. This is just it's like mono white tokens with more removal. Yeah, it's just mono white tokens with more removal. Jeskai Aggro, we don't know about this one. This one's a little interesting. This is an interesting one. So this is a lower tier deck. I believe this is a tier 2 deck. But it managed to take 3rd place, which tier 2 decks are going to snag those as well. So we're not going to do a full breakdown of this one, but because it's not generally a top deck, maybe we'll take a look at some of the tier 2 decks in a later video. But good to know. It's still competing up there in the top 3. All right, we're getting closer to the end of the weekend here. We have a few more before we finish out the weekend. We have another one in San Antonio, Texas. We see that the Domain Zur Overlords took this one, so definitely got to take a look at the first place. This one's running a more simplified package, just a 4-4-3-4 of the Overlords, but they're also running Boiler Bilges instead of the blue Overlord. This is doing a lot of damage, 4 damage to any target when it enters or attacks. Still running the Get Lost. We got the Analyze Pollen, Day of Judgment, Herd Migration, a Sunfall, Leyline Binding, and Up the Beanstalk. So they just switched like the blue card draw for the red damage is the other way to sort of play the domain. Over in the side, nothing crazy. Oh, God. They're running Doppelgang. Doppelgang. God, I hate this card. Doppelgang with Overlords is just insane. It's just insane. Okay. All right, let's let them. All right, we've seen this. We've seen the good old Golgari Annex version. It's strong. It's got a lot of removal. And then we have Golgari Rock. What? Okay. Maelstrom, Nowhere to Run. It's just a lot of really strong black cards. It's kind of like a demon Golgari version. Running a lot of like random one-ofs, which is interesting. It's probably why they got like 3rd. It wasn't very like clear, concise win strategy. But nothing crazy there. Let's go back to the Philippines and see what's going on. We got a Jeskai Convoke, a Dimir Tempo, and a Blue-White or Azorius Glyph. So we haven't really seen an Azorius Glyph yet. Well, kinda. Yeah, there's nothing crazy here. So this is basically the same thing. It's get as many cheap things down as you can, and then you buff like Sky Warden, Regal Bunnycorn. You got Evasion with the Cryptic Coat, giving things flying. Quip Creature, well, not flying, can't be blocked. Clearing the way with Fabloom Trick. You got a lot of removal with the Shelter by Ghost option. Zoetic Glyph that just makes this thing big and comes in swinging. So it's an interesting riff on the Azorius Convoke deck, is really what that comes down to. And then over here, okay, so this Jeskai Convoke deck, we've seen a top 3. We see a win in the Philippines with this deck. So this is something that we might want to kind of be on the lookout for if we see Jeskai. It might not always just be Convoke. It's always going to be Convoke. But if we see Jeskai, we're going to be on the lookout for things like this Imodin Recruiter, this Gleeful Demolition, outside of some of the ones that we were already aware of. So very interesting things going on in the Philippines. All right, we're back to Japan. Prowess aggro. We do like a good old Gruul aggro deck. Nothing crazy, nothing crazy, nothing crazy. Nope. Real standard. Just solid play from that. We got the Dimir. Again, Dimir's the one you got to be on the lookout because there's so many crazy ways you can go with Dimir. But there's like fewer, but still crazy ways that we can go with Golgari. So we always want to take a look and see like, all right, what new tech is coming into the Golgari and the Dimir, because there's such a wide range of things that can be done. And in this particular one, it's a pretty standard Enduring, Fairy, Spyglass, and Kaito package. All right, and then we'll take a look. These guys tied for first. They must have shook hands, called it good. Again, nothing crazy, nothing I'd be on the lookout. And then we got another Jeskai Convoke. Okay, Jeskai Convoke. Definitely needed better. Keep that more on the radar here. Friday Night Showdown. We're going to look at the Philippines again. 8 players. Not enough data. We're just going to keep on skip over that. And then that brings us to the last one on Friday, which is a league. All that to be said, that's a lot. And so I like to do this almost every week. Obviously, when I'm not talking through it, it's much, much quicker for you to kind of click through, take a look at the weekend's past, see if any meta is changed, see if anything crazy is being done, new tech being added to the decks, and then keep these things in mind when you're at your local tournament that they might be bringing in some of this tech. They have access to these same resources, so they might be bringing in these random techs or new strategies, and especially right now, we got to pay attention to Dimir and Golgari because there's so many powerful cards. There's so many powerful ways that you can play either one of those decks. So we always want to be on the lookout for the new tech in those particular decks. So I'm going to be doing this series every week. We're going to take a look at the weekend's past on that Monday, Tuesday after the weekend to hopefully give you the ammunition that you need to go into your local tournament scene confidently knowing what cards you may or may not see. And this was my first video in this series, so I would love for some feedback, things that maybe you want me to peel into a little bit more, maybe something I went too far in depth in. And do keep in mind, this was the first one, so we wanted to lay a little bit of a foundation about where you find this information. In future videos, they're going to be a little bit shorter, where we're just going to dive right into the weekend's past, take a review of those decks, talk through anything that might be going on, and then give you, like I said, that ammunition. Go to that tournament, be confident about what you might run into, maybe even give you some ideas of something that you want to add to your own deck. But as we wrap this up, you should do the thing. Like, comment, leave, subscribe, and then come follow along as this guy tries to qualify for the Pro Tour in the next 5 years. You can catch my live streams on Twitch and on YouTube. And then as we wrap up everything around here, until next time, we'll catch you at the table.